I do not understand what I do, but for what I want I do, chesed, son of Shalomia, Ahiez, or Pedaz, or... That really means something, doesn't it? Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com. With Wolfenstein, the new Colossus, coming out soon, I finally finished Wolfenstein, the New Order, in preparation, and was struck by the strong philosophical themes being touched on so openly in the story. I've collected a few clips that jumped out at me, and I thought I'd share those with you, along with some of my reactions. I apologize as you see me reading my notes. I wanted this to be a little less off the cuff and just a little bit more thoughtful, so that's why you'll see me reading a bit. Now, the clips I'm going to show are from an M-rated game. They'll contain violent imagery, possibly some rough language, so just a heads up about that. The first series of clips centers on an eccentric, mentally unstable yet brilliant character the hero meets named Tekla, who strongly holds to a naturalistic worldview. All right, take a look.
Why aren't you asleep?
I try not to sleep. No telling if I'll ever wake up. Let me ask you something. You will not understand. Where do you go when you lose consciousness? Why even bother?
What?
Surprise, surprise. You have a brain. The brain is a biological computational device running an electrochemical process. Your consciousness is an emergent property of said process. Blank face like that of a baby. In other words, you are your electrochemical process. Fundamentally, you have the experience of a continuous existence. You are you at this point in time, the same you as you were in the past, and you have a sensation of riding along this continuum of being you into the future. Do you follow me? Doesn't look like it. Continuing. On occasion, the brain may be subjected to trauma, temporarily discontinuing the electrochemical process, such as a boxer being knocked out. As this occurs, the brain is no longer running its electrochemical consciousness-generating process. Hence, consciousness is lost. You lose consciousness. Pay attention now. At this point in time, your consciousness, all that is you, your continuum of being you, has ceased to exist in the physical world. Now, moments later, the electrochemical process may start up again, allowing consciousness to emerge out of the information stored in the brain. But I wonder, where are you in the meantime? No, it's too stupid. Must we not assume that at the point when consciousness is lost, the person dies? If a new consciousness appears or not in the same brain is entirely inconsequential to the dead consciousness. The new consciousness is simply a new person. Because it emerges from the same brain, it has access to all the memories and cognitive structures as the dead consciousness, so it thinks it is the same person, but in actuality, it is just an imposter, inheriting the body and brain from the previous, now dead inhabitant. Yes, like talking to a child.
What about the soul?
Soul. I knew he was stupid. There's no such thing as a soul. We are machines of biology, nothing more, nothing less. Idiot! The soul, simply a pointless concept dreamt up by priests and fairy tale men. You're an anomaly, you. An outlier. Useless.
So she says that your consciousness is an emergent property, a property that comes out of your brain's electrochemical processes. You are, she says, your electrochemical process. And then she also asks the question, where are you in the meantime, when your brain ceases electrochemical processes? So she's kind of concocting this bizarre hypothesis about a person dying and then being replaced every time they lose and regain consciousness, rather than accept as more reasonable that our natural experience, our intuitive experience in which we assume we are the same person from day to day, is actually the truth. And she does this all because she's so strongly committed to naturalism, just scoffing at the possibility of a non-physical component to who we are. She's obviously very intelligent, but at the same time assumes that belief in the soul is idiotic. She says he's idiotic for, suggesting the idea of the soul. And this isn't because the idea of a soul is idiotic. It's because she has committed herself to seeing reality only through the limited parameters that the discipline of science purposefully confines itself to, rather than being open to a logical form of philosophy. Philosophy often gets a bad name because a lot of popular philosophers are just really detached and talking about nice ideas and stuff like that, and they can end up adopting this weird form of relativism where everything is true and it's very illogical. But philosophy properly pursued is a pursuit of truth and understanding what is actually real, instead of just grooving and with your fellow philosophers and talking about high-sounding ideas, but no, really trying to suss out what is the nature of reality by incorporating multiple truth-seeking disciplines. That's good philosophy. So, but rather than being open to good philosophy, she's really limiting herself to science as her only way of kind of evaluating what is true, and science just isn't equipped to evaluate and reveal all truth. Because of that self-imposed limitation to her understanding of reality, she has to assume that souls are a made-up concept, not based in reality, and she has to invent any bizarre theory she can to avoid conceding to the soul's existence. It's not that she's necessarily doing bad science, she's just mistakenly concluded that science is the only method of discovering real truths about what is really real. And that's a philosophical error made by actually a lot of popular atheist voices who may stay up to date in their own discipline, but fall very short in the larger realms of truth-seeking like philosophy.
What to make of you, I do not know. Are you here to help me?
You seem beyond help. What are you working on?
Gathering data. Nazi activity, behavioral patterns, ours, theirs, doing the math, developing predictions. Where are they allocating resources? Where will they strike next? And after that, what are the larger trends triggering their actions? Figure out what choices they will make before they make them.
You talk as if the future is inevitable, as if all our choices have already been made.
You think there is such a thing as free will? You know so little of the world. You want to be the captain of your fate, do you? This fight, you will lose. You cannot go to war against physics.
My actions are my own. I know that much.
All phenomena in the physical world follow the simple rule of cause and effect. Your brain is no exception to the rule. Know the causes, you can predict the effects. The same is true for everything.
So what's with the arsenal?
Preparing for the end. I know where my road leads, and I intend to take as many Nazis with me as I can muster.
You have any experience with firearms?
Will you teach me? Looking at me for answers, are you? I have answers, you ape. Real answers of importance. Meaningful answers. None of which you would like. Most of which would make you want to lay down on your back and surrender. Most of which would put a pit in your stomach. Most of which would break your heart. You should find your answers elsewhere.
So Tekla doesn't believe we make choices, but that we rather just respond to stimulus, and that if we had enough data on hand, we could unerringly predict the choice that someone would make given the stimulation provided. But again, this is a massive assumption. It's not something proven by scientific observation of humans, but an hypothesis that she is clinging to in order to maintain her view that we're just biological cause and effect machines. She seems to be designed as a character to be a sad, haunted character that players should feel pity for. I mean, I certainly felt pity for her. Not the idealized scientific mind like, say, a Spock or a Data, who we admire instead of pity. And that says to me that on some level the writers recognize the bleakness and hopelessness that comes as an inevitable outgrowth of a naturalistic worldview. On the naturalistic worldview, there is no purpose or meaning to life. Life has no intrinsic value, and no immoral actions can objectively be condemned. It's a very dark view of the world. There's every reason for bleak depression to result from this worldview. I'm not saying that's a reason to reject it. I would say that there's like logical problems with the atheistic worldview. But this is a reality of the atheistic worldview, the natural outflow of the atheistic worldview that often is not acknowledged. Now, are there hopeful naturalists? Well, sure, there's tons of them. But hope, a sense of meaning and purpose, value for human life, these things do not logically and naturally come out of naturalism or atheism. So naturalists who hold any of those values actually do so in logical conflict with their own worldview. And in that second clip, Tekla even seems to recognize that there is no hope to be found from the way she views the world and their situation.
How do you arrive? Everything in accordance with the numbers. This day, the number of consequence is 19. A prime, why not? For the math to square, each and every one on our side must defeat 19 on theirs, on average, and then we'll win. I've been proficient with what you taught me. 11 in the stack. Did I thank you? I can't remember if I thanked him. Should thank the man that is my friend. But I have accumulated an additional 7 through other means prior to this day.
I'm on the move. I need to find Fergus and Caroline. You should come with me.
And violate my model. The model is loyal to universal causality. You ask me to rebel against the laws of nature, don't you see? The road in front of you is long and so hard. I wonder how you will cope. Mine is at its end. On this day, I am glad to have found a friend.
Now, in the last scene with Tekla, she is optimistic and positive, if we can call it, her version of those things. And this is, I think, the result of her character arc. This is her happy ending, how she's kind of grown as a character, I think, is what they're trying to show us here. And it's not the result, her growth here is not the result of her worldview. It's in conflict with her worldview, as the hope she is feeling is the result of her interaction with William Blaskowitz, if I'm saying his name right. I'm never quite sure how to say his last name, who unfathomably to her believes in the idea of a soul. So our hero is set up as a positive influence on the characters around him. If any voice in the game represents the worldview the writers think is correct and praiseworthy, I think it's supposed to be the hero here. So what is our hero's worldview? Well, we'll come back to that near the end of this video. In the meantime, let's hear from another naturalist, this time the big villain of the game, monologuing over a loudspeaker. Look at the subtitles if you're watching the video version, as they may be helpful to catch all that he's saying.
No matter how many soldiers burn, how much concrete you shed, will never soil my legacy. I have willed into existence a new age, an age of reason, of purity, of strength. Your legacy is nothing but a calm impulse of anger. No different from the gorilla in the jungle beating his chest, and even less impressive.
Okay, if you didn't catch all that, he basically said that he has willed into existence an age of reason, purity, and strength, while our hero's legacy is nothing but an animalistic impulse of anger. He views himself, this villain, as the voice of reason, and our hero as reckless emotion. We'll come back to that.
In work like this, it is easy to be tempted to sense compassion. We must learn that this is pointless instinct, not fit for the master race.
Here, the naturalistic villain says that compassion is pointless instinct. He has hardened himself against compassion and against seeing human life as valuable in order to justify his torture, mutilation, and murder of countless victims. So these clips, I think, show the other dark side that naturally flows out of naturalism. Developing strength and gaining knowledge for the species is, the highest priority, because these will further adapt the species for survival. So learning, being, and reason and strength, those are high values. Anything that it takes to advance the species, and morals can be set aside. So this character is trying to create this master race of humanity. This is like full-on Darwinism applied to one's worldview. Naturalistic, Darwinism, I should specify. Additionally, if human life has no intrinsic worth and no objective moral values or duties actually exist, then this character is permitted to do whatever he wants. So he's being very consistent with a naturalistic worldview here. It used to be much more rare for the dark ramifications of atheism to be showcased in fiction, but it's becoming more common, and this seems to be one example of this. But what does the game have to say about theism? Well, let's take a look at that.
Oh, Mr. Blaskowicz, I will need some welding equipment, please. Sid,
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out what exactly you were doing in this organization of yours. Was it some kind of supernatural engineering?
We don't believe in things supernatural, Mama. We believe in God. Yeah, the Das Yichud it's a philosophy. It is a way of understanding God through knowledge. It is based on pure reason, pure rational thought, not supernatural bupkis.
Huh. So everything you have created, what were you planning on using all that stuff for?
Oh, you don't understand, Mama. There was never any purpose or intent of use beyond the act of creation. We create to commune with God. Do you see that?
You've lost me.
It's like mathematical equations.
Go on, Madeline.
And each solved equation brings you closer to God.
But never intended to be used.
No, the act of creation itself is the intended use.
What does Madeline? There's something cooking in that Chinese of hers. Do you appreciate the distinction?
Set, as far as I can tell, is part of an organization that seems to adhere to some form of Kabbalah, a mystic, occultic kind of belief system that is only vaguely and inconsistently defined, as far as I can tell, and that comes out of ancient Jewish tradition. Set's view of God is likewise only vaguely defined. He seems to rule out the supernatural, possibly seeing the word God as just an expression of infinite knowledge or something, and yet in a later scene, he talks about God kind of as a person, so his position is hard to nail down, much like the beliefs of pop spirituality so many believe in today that, when examined, are just like self-defeating and inconsistent. Set is very much in line with the popular and initially appealing desire to have a God that provides meaning, purpose, and value for human life, but who is vague and removed, and so not holding anyone accountable for anything. All right, so let's try to get a sense of our hero's worldview.
I remember this moment. Back in the camp.
This woman, I know her well. A zillion, the will of iron, a family gone, all of them yet. Faith kept her going. I cannot believe with such certainty. For me, in everything there must be doubt, otherwise there's no room to question the plan. And, at this place, this is the fruit of unquestioned, ferocious conviction. This is where absolute certainty leads.
Yet you are a believer.
I often wonder what kind of a God would sanction suffering such as this, and I question myself whether my faith is misplaced.
Maybe he's testing us.
Well, Egyptian, if he is testing us, we are failing gloriously.
So our hero seems to be open to the idea of God. I mean, he's asking questions, and so, there's not anything clearly defined, but he seems to be open and asking questions and wondering, what's going on here, and maybe God is doing this and stuff. While Set struggles with the idea of being certain about matters of faith. He sees the evil that has come from people with certainty about their beliefs, and his reaction is to avoid any worldview that advocates certainty of belief. So what about biblical Christianity? Is that a worldview that necessitates certainty of belief? Well, we definitely see absolute confidence in Yahweh as an ideal. Jesus performed miracles so that his witnesses at the time could know he was who he said he was. We see that in Matthew 9:6, Mark 2:10, Luke 5:24, and John 10:38. Paul's prayer in Ephesians 1:8 is that his readers would know the hope they've been called to. 1 John was written so that believers could know they have eternal life. And yet certainty, in the philosophical sense, is hard, if not impossible, to come by. I mean, I can't prove that my whole life isn't a dream or a simulation and I'm just a brain in a jar somewhere. I can't prove that's not the case. And yet I'm absolutely reasonable to say I know that isn't true. Yeah, it's theoretically possible, but woefully implausible, so why even waste time thinking about it, since I have no positive evidence indicating I'm in a simulation. Every day, we contentedly deal in uncertainty. We just take it for granted that we deal with uncertainty every day. trusting that our food isn't poisoned, even though it could be. We don't know what went on in the factory that we bought that box of crackers from. We trust that our cars won't blow up. Someone could have planted a bomb in our car. That's possible, but we don't, we trust, we don't even think about it. We're just like, no one put a bomb. We don't even think about it, And we trust that our dentist won't mutilate us after putting us under. Now, on that one, we might get nervous about being put under. We might have doubts about that, either because we don't, the dentist maybe looks a little funny, or maybe we're not sure he's capable. We see the his education plaque up on the wall, but still we maybe have our doubts or concerns, or he might make a mistake or something like that. But ultimately we trust more than we doubt. And we weigh the cost if we choose not to trust, and so we choose to trust more than we doubt, and so we allow that dentist to put us under and do his work. And there are all kinds of different variations, different grades of degrees of trust and that we have in things that we're dealing with all the time without even thinking about it. So trust, faith is just a part of our everyday experience, and a lack of certainty is part of our everyday experience, despite the fact that we are making very reasonable decisions. The Bible also assumes that doubt will be a part of the Christian experience. Not because trusting in the claims of the Bible is irrational, but because the cares of the world, just the stresses, all the kinds of things that we have to deal with, can get the better of us, and we can forget to trust what God has said and the evidence that He's given to back up what He's said. It's assumed that some believers will actually have weaker faith than that of others. If you look at Romans 12:6 and Romans 14:1, I think those are indications there. But this doesn't bar anyone from God's gift of eternal life. It's also assumed that faith can grow. 2 Corinthians 10:15, 1 Thessalonians 3:10, and 2 Thessalonians 1:3, I think, indicate that. Faith can also be disrupted. I think we see that in 2 Timothy 2:18. And finally, the New Testament Greek word for faith itself actually means trust more than it does some kind of just blind faith. As many often assume faith must be this kind of blind faith, but that's not biblical faith. And trust implies incomplete knowledge. After all, I don't trust that I'm looking at a webcam. I know that I am because it's right there. I don't have to trust that the webcam is there. I see it. There it is. By contrast, biblical trust faith is the assurance of things hoped for, this conviction of things not seen, and we see that in Hebrews 11:1. Again, not because it isn't based in reason, but because full knowledge is incomplete, requiring at least some degree of reasonable trust. So because of the philosophical sense of the word certainty, I prefer words like confident or convinced, which I think line up well with the biblical concept of faith. Finally, near the end of the game, we see a striking example of self-sacrifice and compassion from a character, which character I won't spoil, so I'm not going to show a clip of that. And even though self-sacrifice is not a rare theme in fiction, it certainly flows more naturally out of a theistic worldview, especially a Christian worldview, when compared to atheism. And then in the midst of this character's sacrifice, they movingly, at least movingly to me, I was surprised at the times that I was moved by cutscenes in this game. They quote the poem The New Colossus, which is the famous poem. If you don't know the title, I wasn't familiar with the title, but it's the poem on the Statue of Liberty. And they don't quote the whole thing, and we, even what they do quote, much of it was unfamiliar except for like a few lines. But quoted in the game, I think, if I remember correctly, was this: a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. And this poem itself, in particular the portion quoted in the game, reminds me of Jesus when he said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's from Matthew 11:28 through 30. So, in summary, I really appreciated the way they handled a lot of the themes in this game. It's certainly not always consistent with a Christian worldview, but it parallels biblical thought much more than most other video games that I've played in recent years. So, and I really enjoyed the gameplay itself as well. I'm really looking forward to Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, especially now that I know the name of that poem. Like, I wonder where they're going. It seems like it's picking up right from where from this game left off, and it'll be interesting to see that the themes that they play with in Wolfenstein: The New Colossus when it releases at the end of September. All right, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.